I'm Cat Oriel, a reporter with Forbes Breaking News. Today, I'm here with my Forbes colleague, senior editor Dan Alexander. Dan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
So once again, today you were in New York City covering former President Donald Trump's civil fraud trial, where today he took the stand once again. And you were also there giving play-by-play live updates. So can you give us a brief recap about what this trial is about and what it was like in that courtroom today?
Sure, this is a $250 million fraud trial. It's over allegations that Donald Trump lied about his net worth for years to financial institutions and thereby gained benefits, for example, lower interest rates on loans that he was taking. We've already seen plenty of testimony from other witnesses, including Donald Trump's two oldest sons. But of course, today was a big one with Donald Trump himself on the stand, and fireworks flew as you would expect.
Give me more information about what you mean by fireworks flew. Like during Trump's testimony, how was his body language, his facial expressions, his emotions while he was being, as I saw in your updates, mostly being reprimanded by the judge to stay on track?
So, he came in clearly with a plan to be calm. And he seemed for Donald Trump relatively subdued. He was answering questions, fairly calmly in a relaxed manner. Then he started to slip in some criticisms of the attorney general and of the case itself and even of the court, but still keeping his composure. There's an old line that, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's kind of what happened. Then the attorney general's office started hitting him with some more difficult questions, and Trump basically lashed out. He went after the attorney general, who was, of course, not asking him questions. She was sitting in the front row watching the proceedings. And he even went after the judge who's overseeing the case, at one point even yelling at him. We've seen a lot of controversial and testy testimony over the course of this trial, but nothing quite like this.
Was there a particular question that you could pinpoint that set him off?
There was at one point they asked him whether he believed that his net worth was inflated, and so this is just sort of a overarching question to get at his intent and mindset and his overall thoughts on some of the allegations in this case. And Trump clearly understood that that was what the question was. And he sort of sat back and he didn't answer the question directly. And instead, he just went off and said this is a witch hunt, said that the attorney general is only launching this case because she wanted to have political power of her own, went after the judge and said that he was biased and that the judge never ruled in his favor. So it was in moments when there were sort of these wider ranging questions that Trump really seemed to dial up the temperature.
I know the judge pulled up your story in particular about Trump inflating the net worth. So do you feel like Trump's reaction, was it before or after he brought up the story that he became a little more dicey?
Well, so it was the attorney general's office that brought up the story, and they wanted to question him about some of the lies that we had exposed in the story. Trump was lying about the profitability of a particular building. And the attorney general asked him, have you lied about the profitability of this building or inflated the profitability of this building in order to try to boost your net worth? And Trump said, no, I don't think so. And but that wasn't true, And then the attorney general's office brought up the story and even played an audio recording that we had released as part of the story of Trump doing just that, inflating the profits of the building in an attempt to boost the value of it. And, he basically at that point, the rant turned towards Forbes and he, went after Forbes, said he didn't care what we thought, called us all sorts of insults and I don't talk to those people anymore or whatever. Clearly, Donald Trump still does. And since 1982 has cared deeply about what Forbes says that he is worth, not because, it's not because of Forbes in itself, but because people want to know how much he's worth. And, we're a neutral arbiter of people's net worth. And when they lie about how much their assets are worth, we call them on it. And he views it as a credible source. And that's why he reacts so strongly when he's pinned on some of the lies that we've called him out on in the past.
Right. And I know you're there as you're in your capacity as a journalist, but on a personal level, how did it feel to have the former president, attacking you and the company where you work and the publication where you work and sort of saying these things while you're there and in his presence?
Well, I don't know. I mean, of course, I'm just sort of trying to keep my head down and keep typing away. I mean, yeah, you notice it, you look up. It's interesting when it's happening, but you sort of just try to stay in the moment and focus on what's being said. And in this case, Trump was saying things that didn't seem to line up with the truth, and so it was focusing really on what his words were, and then understanding what our reporting was and what he had told us in the past and where there were inconsistencies there.
And so last week, when you were talking with our colleague Brittany Lewis, you mentioned that his demeanor really shifts when he's in front of the camera versus behind closed doors. So did you notice that shift again today?
I was not in the gaggle where he sometimes talks to reporters, so I didn't see his demeanor, but outside. But having watched him on television enough, I can take an educated guess that it probably was different based on what I was seeing in the courtroom. As I said, in the courtroom, he was relatively subdued for some of the time. Then he got angry. And at times, he seemed like he was talking to the media from the witness stand. So he was using, sort of the expressions and the intonations that he does when he's really trying to emphasize a point. Some of the words that he was saying were things that you would expect to find on his Twitter feed, for instance. And other times he was more subdued. So you sort of saw all parts of Donald Trump on the witness stand today, including the parts that we see all the time in front of the cameras, but also some, more cautious parts that he doesn't always display for the cameras.
And then during the gaggle, we know that Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, claimed that the judge also grew a rate with her. Can you describe that moment in particular as well?
Well, Trump's lawyers, were objecting, and they, object all the time in the trial. And at this point, the judge clearly disagreed with what they were trying to say, and they were continuing to make the point, and he basically said, sit down already, and that sort of ended it. But that was one of the tersest responses that we've seen the judge make toward counsel on either side in this case.
So what's next? Did today's testimony, you think, move the trial forward? What else do you think we can expect to see from Team Trump as it continues?
Yeah, I definitely think that today's testimony was important. I think that the Attorney General's office is probably very pleased with how it went. Donald Trump admitted that he was involved in the asset valuations on certain assets, and that's key. These, asset valuations and the overall net worth numbers are at the center of this case. And him saying, yes, I was engaged on some of this, and I did look at these documents, is important. So I've got to imagine that they're feeling confident and happy with how today's testimony went. Trump's team, maybe not so much. But going forward, so tomorrow is election day. The courts are closed in New York. On Wednesday morning, we expect Ivanka Trump to take the stand, and she should be on the stand through Wednesday and perhaps a little bit into Thursday morning.
Do you have any insight into how you think Ivanka's demeanor might be when she takes the stand?
Well, we've seen her in some legal proceedings before. For example, we saw snippets of her testimony when she was talking to the January 6th committee on Congress. And in those moments, she looks extremely defensive and very serious, understands the gravity of the situation and is affronted by the fact that people are leveling these accusations against her or her family. I expect to see something similar when she takes the stand on Wednesday. She's going to be pressed on hard questions. She was involved in lying about her father's net worth, including in conversations with reporters from Forbes, where she said things that were objectively not true, saying that there was like almost no debt on Trump National Doral Golf Resort that Donald Trump owns in Miami, when in fact it had $125 million of debt on it, saying that their interest rate was far lower than it actually was on that property. So demonstrably untrue things, and I expect her to be pinned on some of the past statements that she has made, and things could get tense in the courtroom when that happens.
Well, thank you for the recap. That's the end of my questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that I didn't get to touch on yet about what you witnessed today in court?
No, I don't think so. I think that was great. Thanks so much for having me.